Hello. Hi. My name is Sharlot Eisentraut, and today I'm going to be giving my testimony on mindset transformation. This is probably one of the hardest things I've done. I have written about it like every 3 years. I have stories on my website and on LinkedIn that I've updated through the years because it is kind of like it's a progressive thing. You're never really done with it. But this is a testimony where it's in the last 10 years, I've made so much progress that I know that I have to say it. I have to be honest about what I've been through and to give other people hope. So this video is meant to help anyone who is struggling financially or with their concept of success or purpose or validation and understanding from people who they really, really care about and who they've wanted to satisfy and have them be proud of for years. This can include just about anyone who is in an industry that you're very successful, but it's like never enough, or you've had attachment trauma with your caregivers, your parents, your guardians, and you need something to hold on to and to say like it can get better, and I don't have to be sad and depressed all the time, or I don't have to be like. It's also to know that you don't have to be what other people want you to be, so long as you're not hurting anybody and not hurting yourself. And if I know anything, it's that when you are constantly trying to make other people happy, one of the things that often happens is that your happiness becomes secondary. And your successes are based off of whatever other people want for you. And so this video is to help people who need to have hope, to know that there's another way, to know that they don't have to be chasing the carrot anymore if they don't want to know that they can be themselves, to know that they can find themselves and that they can find who they authentically are, love that part of themselves, discover that part of themselves, heal and get rid of attachment traumas such as like abuse and neglect. I guess on some level, then I have to like let you know that there is, I guess, like a trigger warning, because this is very hard. And healing the mind is very difficult. I'm not going to paint it with like a pretty picture, but I am going to give you a parable before I get into the real nitty gritty, without giving away too much information, right? So my channel mostly focuses on mindset, relationships, business, spirituality, and leadership. I have a few videos already out on forgiveness and leadership, and I want to say I've also done a little bit on teamwork and also how we lead ourselves, or how we interact as a leader. So for this channel, my vision is to help as many people as possible to help them know that there is another way, and that and I have a whole list of different things that I would love to talk about, and more videos that I would like to add. I've done coaching, I've done one-on-one coaching, I've done business consulting, I've done life coaching. I am certified in life coaching, and I do have an engineering degree from Northern Arizona University in civil engineering. Civil engineering is a very broad spectrum of different studies and with my upbringing from my family, which I now know is a blessing, because it took me a while, but it is definitely a blessing that I was raised the way that I was, so that I could think critically and so that I could discover things and be the scientist and do the experiments necessary to discover myself, to discover what was holding me back, and then and push through that and heal that. And then also since then I've also seen a lot of people hurting similar to me who have been traumatized in different ways, and have held very limiting belief because of those traumas. And it is so limiting belief is definitely it is so easy. Just let me just say real quick, it is so easy to say you can just get rid of limiting beliefs and you can just get rid of the trauma, but it is so much harder to do. See, there's a lot. So I actually grew up with the just get it done, and just do it, but it's like, honey, it takes years. Like, it takes years to open a business. It takes years to get it in your mind that you deserve some of these things. But guess what? I'm not saying that it's impossible. It's not. You just have to be realistic with yourself. It took years for me to really discover who I am and what I want. It just was. I thought it was going to be a 6-month thing and then I was done. Like, I was just going to be done with the trauma. I don't have to go into my childhood. Boy, that was a disappointment. Anyway, moving on. Like, I don't want to get ahead of myself here. So for this channel, my vision really is to help people who are struggling and who are successful, but are very likely successful in the ways that maybe they didn't want to be successful, and that doesn't speak to them authentically. Now, does this mean that I'm going to cater to every little person's wants and feelings? Like, no, I'm not going to be. I don't do Tumblr fairy stuff. I'm very accepting of people, but I do my best to have healthy boundaries. So I don't do the whole pronoun stuff. I don't get into the whole politics of that. I don't really get into religion either, but I do get into spirituality. And spirituality means that there has been things. This is where my middle name is Sybil, but this is one of those things where I'm using this name, and this is a name that I feel very strongly that I have been given, and that speaks very strongly to me. And that is, Sybil basically means somebody who essentially speaks for God. But with that means that I am under certain constraints. I am under the constraint of giving truth without hopefully offending anybody. But the problem is with truth, somebody is going to be offended. Ultimately, someone is going to be offended, and if someone is offended, it probably means that it speaks to them emotionally. It speaks to them in their heart and their soul, because some of these things they know is true. I've done readings for people. I've given them truth. I've stepped around I try to just say it as it is and be as diplomatic as I can, and people will still be offended by the truth. It is what it is. And if you do find yourself offended by the truth, then that probably means that this is pushing you. This is part of therapy and healing that people don't talk about a lot. And that is that true healing, true therapy is the kind that kind of pushes you. The kind that makes you think, okay, maybe my reality is not as whatever as you think that it is. Maybe I'm not as special as I thought. Maybe I'm not as smart as I thought. Maybe I'm not as as amazing as I thought. Like, maybe my fantasies don't match reality. Because I know, because I was there. I was I almost think that maybe at one point I was so I know that I was at one point borderline personality disorder, but that also means, as a part of that there was a level of narcissism that was uncomfortably true, which meant that as a part of being a narcissist, or as a part of being in this psychological bubble, there is reality and then there's fantasy. And those two things don't always match up. And that's one of the things that I see a lot in producers and in not producers of, like, in YouTube's and some of this like, there is a healthy level of narcissism, but our reality and our truth and our fantasy versus, like, how people actually see us are all interconnected. And if we're fantasizing about things that aren't true, thinking that we deserve so much more than we do, like, deserving is one of those things where it's like, you deserve to be treated humanely. And the concept of fairness is a never-ending cycle that we will all experience in our lives, because what is fair to one person is not going to be the same as what is fair to another. But one of the things about fantasy is that fantasy means a lot of dreaming and a lot of, like, wishing that you were in a different situation than you are, which usually means that the situation that you're currently in is painful. And sometimes certain kinds of pain can be helpful for us because it helps us grow. And certain kinds of pain can be very detrimental because it creates limiting beliefs, such as trauma. And what is traumatic is going to be different to different people based on their own sensitivities and everything like that. And certain people are just going to be able to spring back so much easier than others. Some people are very, very sensitive. It is what it is. And it also, a lot of that is based on how you were raised from your parents. Like, did you have that emotional like, if when you were raised with, anyway, I can get into all of that, like, because there's attachments, and, like, and what was your parents there for you, your guardians there for you, were they not, were they if they were constantly putting you down, then that sets you up in a lot of ways for failure when failure comes, because then you're like, well, I don't deserve it, or I'm not. And then there's this struggle. Everybody has, like, a kind of mental struggle when it comes to going outside of our comfort zone. And that's a lot of why it is that mindset is so, so important. And a lot of why it is that I feel that even just giving my testimony is so important, because mindset is everything. And one of the things that I've learned as part of going through the process of going deeper and deeper into my mind is that the more that I found out that our actions on the outside is a reflection of what is going on the inside. And this is why it is that mindset is so important. It's why it is that we have a huge booming business about it. It's a big industry. And it's a constant thing. It's a process. It's a constant process. However, I have been through literally transformational mindset, because I used to be I used to be in a lot of pain. Okay? I used to be very sad, very depressed, and now I feel so much more free. and I don't hold on to things as much as I used to. Which basically, in a lot of ways, I would interpret as being happy. Like, I wasn't happy, now I'm happy. Like, and it took 10 years. I thought it would take 6. Like, but it is difficult, and it's a road that is well worth it. Well worth it. I remember being asked, well, what do you have to show for it? My self-esteem, my pride. I feel good about myself. I like myself now, and I'm not trying to like satisfy other people. Those are really, really good things, because now I'm living my life the way that I want to, and I am attracting people and things that I want to, rather than attracting people and things that I don't want to, that doesn't match with who I authentically am. Because when we are authentically ourselves, then we can authentically be. Like, literally be. When we are authentically ourselves, we can exist in a way that aligns with us. Because when we have that alignment with our soul, we feel satisfaction. We feel life satisfaction, that we are living our purpose. There's the saying that so many goals and dreams exist in cemeteries, precisely because there were people who didn't have the catalyst to help them pursue their goals and dreams in a way that they wanted. And it was because of limiting beliefs, it was because of these traumas that kept them there, and that they lived and they died. And they didn't actually pursue or do the things that authentically spoke to them. There are a lot of successful people, don't get me wrong. There is still a lot of successful people who have passed. But as a part of that, how many of those people have been successful for other people? And that creates a huge disconnect. When you're not living your authentic life, it is very uncomfortable. And it is very distracting, and it is very disappointing for yourself. And when you at first, anyway, I could go on and on about it. And that's why it is that I started this video, this channel, because it can get better. Like, you can feel better, you can be who you are, you can be what you need to do, you can do and be what you need to do. Like, if I hadn't had my catalyst, I would still be constantly in pain and suffocation. Like, a lot of it feels like suffocation of trying to satisfy other people, when really the person who is most important in my life that I've realized really is me. But that doesn't mean that I'm not caring about other people. I absolutely am. I absolutely do. That's why I started business in the first place. Because I could see that there was suffering. I could see that other people were suffering the same way that I was, and I thought, I need to do something. And so I had left engineering. I had left engineering, the traditional engineering, right? The engineer who's at the computer, who's doing the thing, and I'm not that. I'm a social person. I have to be a teacher. I feel very strongly like a teacher. I have to be interacting with people. I don't do the whole sitting down at a computer for 8 hours a day. It's not my cup of tea. Coaching is my cup of tea. I love people and I love talking to people. Okay, so next is, so addressing envy. Everybody's gonna feel envy at some point, okay? It's totally okay to feel envious at some point. The point is that if I, what I had said about, envious is, because I sing sometimes, and yes, I have had people, be envious of my singing, but, nobody's gonna sing perfectly all the time. Nobody's going to be perfect all the time. And consider, like, the times when it is that you've seen people who seem perfect on the outside, so often they have issues that they're not dealing with. So if you ever, and this goes for social media as well. When you see a lot of these people, you know, like, the camera's on, everything's rolling, they're feeling good, right? Like, that doesn't mean that their entire life is amazing. It really doesn't. And so if you're feeling that sting of envy, remember that nobody's perfect and everybody is perfectly imperfect, as in each person's imperfections actually make them awesome in their own way. And again, I actually on a regular basis pretty much like like if I sing just to like amuse myself, you know, and sometimes that singing doesn't mean that it's amazing. Sometimes it means it's almost like cartoonish. And that's okay. You know, just like with life. Like when we look at life as an exploring as an explorer, we're more likely to have an open mind. Anyway, okay. So the parable of my story, the parable of my testimony essentially is this. For most of my life, it was darkness. So for most of my life, it's like the sky was gray, and the plants didn't really grow. It was raining all the time. So a parable basically means it's like something that's very similar to what I've experienced, but in a story form. So it's like a metaphor. Okay. So the parable is most of my life, things were very dark, and I had a lot of sadness, and I was living my life to make other people happy. I wore a mask, starting at a young age. This is the part that I don't like. And it took, so I was mostly sad. And then one day, I came across so again, we're parable. Then one day I came across several lions, or several like lion, tigers, and bears, right? And in order to avoid them, I started to dig a hole. And as a part of digging that hole, I tried to keep wearing the mask. But the hole became deeper and started to be full of tears. As a way to avoid them, I was walking on eggshells, and every little step that I took wasn't good enough. And I was stubborn. Once I got down to bedrock, I had graduated from college. And that's where I had called out for help. And in order to climb out of the hole, I had to, there was a ladder that came down. But this ladder was very hot, and it had insects crawling all over it. And as I started to climb the ladder, it burned. And I started to bring up and see around me the skeletons in my closet, the unresolved issues. I started to have tea with my skeletons. I started to have tea with my past, to try to understand it, to try to put things in a more logical light. Climbing out of that hole was a lot harder than digging into it. Because at least when I dug, I could hide. But now that I was climbing out of it with the help of other people, it became very painful. As I was putting everything in a more logical light. As I was taking these skeletons and trying to accept what happened, trying to understand, trying to get things into a more logical view. And the blessing was, the thing that I was looking forward to is that the more that I climbed, the more that I went, the more that I climbed with each step, with each railing, the more that I saw light. And once I had broken the surface, that's where I started to more get into the emotional regulation and emotional processing. And I could start to see green around me for the first time. The sky was not as dark. The wind was not as harsh. The lions and the tigers and the bears had gone. I mean, they were still around, but I was still precautious. But I wasn't as scared. I wasn't nearly as scared because I was at like a medium point. And so then, with further help, I got on my feet. With further help, I started to walk, and I could see more and more how beautiful life is. I could see more and more. I could see more and more that I was not completely helpless. I could see more and more that I could walk, that I could see, that I could accept what was, and that I could see that my environment was not as scary as I had initially thought that it was. And oh goodness. So I can't mute so that you can't like But as I went and as I got even more help, it was like it's like I found this mythical airplane that is so powerful because it was helping me with uh, with my beliefs, because had been working on my body, and now I was starting to work on my soul. And I got into this plane and we started to take off. And again, remember, this is a parable. So we started to take off, and I started to learn so much about what it means to exist. I learned so much about what really happened. I learned so much about being able to have so much more about being able to have a logical mindset and accept the things you cannot change. Oh gosh. Okay. And I learned how to, I learned how to really look at what had happened to me from a very, very logical mindset. And I saw, the more that I went up, the more that I saw the beauty. And the more that I could accept what had originally seemed like it was dark was just was. And as a part of my journey upwards in this magical plane, I learned all the secrets about God. And I learned that God exists, and I learned that there's a spiritual world, and I learned that there are energies that are a part of us and within us and separate from us. And I learned to not be afraid. And I learned to separate myself from what I thought was scary. And I learned that I am strong, and I learned that I am valuable, and I learned that I am deserving. But I also learned that there's my limits to what I can change and influence is pretty small. I'm just gonna take a minute and see if I can change the volume here real quick, so that, because I don't know how to edit. I'm sorry. I just really need to I need a minute so that I can be able to speak to you. Okay. Okay, I'm back. All right. So I was in this magical plane, and I learned so much. I learned so much about what it means to exist. I learned so much about God and angels and the and the devil, and what evil, what is the meaning of evil. And I read, as a part of my journey through the whole thing, I was reading a lot of books, and I had a lot of help, and I had a lot of resources, and I used my own mind, my own logic, my own engineering to reverse engineer a lot of these limiting beliefs, so that I could pinpoint what was going on and what was keeping me back. And so I was in the sky. So as part of the parable, I'm in the sky for a while. It was amazing. It was like I was untouchable. I mean, it was like nothing pissed me off. like during this time, it's like I was just completely like accepting of what is. And truly this it was therapy. This form of therapy was just so incredibly mind-blowing that, I mean, I stayed up there for a while. And it was very enjoyable for sure, because when you have the mindset of like being an untouchable and having no triggers, no traumatic like things going on of like freaking out and whatever. I mean, it was amazing. It was magical. Literally, it was magical. So continuing the parable. Eventually, I started to come back down to earth, and 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 touch the ground, and it's like, okay, this is our reality, and even while I was up there, it's like my mind was up there. Obviously my body stayed down here, but my mind was just so strong, um, and so capable, and I was at such an ease with getting into that logical mindset. I mean, I loved it. I didn't want to get out of that. I was in there for 2 years, a good 2 solid years of just kind of like minds being like up here, and so I eventually came back down, and I'm looking at the ground, and everything's blooming. Like there's flowers everywhere. It's and it's so green, and the sky is so blue, and sometimes it rains, but I'm not cowering. I'm not so much in fear. The hole is gone. There's I know that there's tigers. What is it? What's the term? It's tigers and dragons. What? Like I know that it's like I've touched down, and I know that there are bad things around me, right? Because there's certain things that you're never really gonna be able to get rid of, and but I'm not so scared of them anymore, and I'm still taking my precautions. I'm still aware of like where I am, but it's recognizing how gorgeous and beautiful our existence is. So I've touched down, and now I'm walking, and it's like, and now I'm walking in so much more peace and understanding that heart, mind, and soul, I feel better, and I've released a lot of like not only has trauma to a large, how many times can I say large? To a large extent has been not lifted from my brain, but also from my body, because we do hold trauma. We hold a lot of trauma in our body, in our muscles, and in some organs. Definitely. And I see my existence. I see the existence of me being me. I understand myself so much better, and like on occasion, it's like as a part. So again, as part of this parable, it's like walking, knowing that there is blooming, and there are other people, and sometimes the people are good, and sometimes the people might be like, but it's like collaborating. There's a lot more collaboration. Now, granted, I am a Libra, so I already feel, and social. So I already kind of feel that, but I'm just not as scared. I'm not as afraid, and I'm very much more accepting and happier. And if I can do it, you can do it too. That's the thing. Like yeah, it took some hard work, and because it wasn't just hard work psychologically. Like I still had other stuff going on in my life, but the psychological work was definitely a full-time job while I was doing other jobs, while I was doing other things in life. But that is essentially what I went through. Now the story of the test my story of testimony, which in a lot of ways correlates with what I had just told you of the parable, is essentially a lot of my a lot of my life was very, very sad. I was very depressed. I was just very sad. There was a lot of my life where I was just sad. And I was living my life for other people, and I was wearing that mask, and I was doing everything that I could to get that validation and that love and understanding from my parents. But I was not myself. I was not authentically me. I was not being myself. I did a lot of work to at first to satisfy other people, and I now realize that my engineering degree is quite frankly very much of a blessing, and I'm very, very thankful for it, and I'm very thankful for my parents too. They did the best that they could. So, but as a part of the testimony of like what actually happened, is that about 2 years before graduating from college, I had a really, really stressful time. I was dealing with some very toxic roommates, and I was dealing with some very toxic students. There was 3 people in particular, but it was stress at home and stress at school. And I now realize that I was not a perfect victim, because I did have some responsibility, and I have to take accountability for my actions during this time. A lot of the times, as part of the victimhood, is like, it's all of them, they did it, and I'm angry, and I and I then feel like I am able and it's necessary to go into like revenge mode, and hurt them in some way. But I mean, I didn't hurt them, never did. But I did have that victim mindset for sure for quite a while. And but as a part of the healing process, I realized my accountability in what had happened. I realized that I wasn't the complete and total victim, like that I had talked to them, or that I had spoken back, right? That I held my defenses, and that I had that I was doing my best to have healthy boundaries, and whatever that means. I was doing my best to do what I could with the situation that I was given, and mistakes were made. Things were said from both them and me, and yeah, but it was one of those things where that having those 2 years of having stress at home and stress at work was my catalyst. It was several things of just having constant stress, and if I hadn't had that, I mean, I'm very thankful for it now, because the catalyst was the thing, like having all that stress was the thing that helped me finally understand that I needed help, and that I couldn't keep living my life the way that I had. And so after those 2 years, or like about 3 months after graduating with a degree in civil engineering, right there, I went through trauma therapy, and with her we worked on how to regulate ourselves when we are triggered, how to look at situations in a more logical light, and she helped me get some tools so that then when I am and if I am triggered, that I have those tools at my disposal to use so that things don't escalate to a point where people are hurt, and nobody wants that. And then, so after trauma therapy, I saw a rather brilliant, like brilliant, but also like it was very uncomfortable. She was a sociologist, but and certified in eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy. But we had been together for about 6 months of therapy. So she said, you know what, I can't start you on EMDR because you need to have some emotional regulation. You need to have more emotional regulation in place before we can really go to this spot, because bringing up a lot of these things were just made me cry. It made me and I had a hard time regulating my body, and I had a hard time regulating my heart rate and my voice, and I had a really hard time. And so I started dialectical behavioral therapy. Now, granted, one of the things that I'm really, really thankful for her, and why it is that I say that she's brilliant, is because she did push me. She pushed me in terms of you have to realize that this is your truth, right? And the truth was that I quite possibly really did have borderline personality disorder and depression and codependency issues that were not being addressed. And so with her, we addressed a lot of those issues, and it was good to just get that up and be like, okay, this is a problem, right? And so because she got me out of my comfort zone in that way in therapy, which was something that, looking back on, I am very thankful for. Okay, so moving on, then the next thing that I started was dialectical behavioral therapy. And this is where I learned emotional regulation, radical acceptance, a lot more about interpersonal relationships, and there's always the fourth that, so interdependent relationships and emotional regulation. I already said that, but there's a fourth. Anyway, I learned these skills from dialectical behavioral therapy. This is something that a lot of people, I highly recommend, and if you if you ever open up the DSM-5 and you look at borderline personality disorder and you think, maybe that's me, you might consider starting dialectical behavioral therapy. I highly recommend it because we're not always taught by our parents how to emotionally regulate ourselves. And that was huge. Practicing that emotional regulation and radical acceptance meaning things happened, it wasn't great. That doesn't mean that it's okay, but it does mean that we have to we have to accept what we can't change, and we have to accept what we can't influence. One of the things that often happens with abusive and codependent relationships is that the other person says you control more than you do. So, when they say, you made me do this, or you made me say this, or you made me throw this at you, it's the honest truth is that, no, that's not true. That you didn't. You can only really, you have some control over your breath, you have some control over your emotions, some control over, the hand gestures, just like what I'm doing right now, and you have some control over what you say. And even then, sometimes it's kind of limited, especially when you have a lot of trauma, and I'm not going to use that please do not use that as an excuse. It just is. When you've been triggered and you're in a high level fight or flight mode, you're going to say things that you're going to mean in the moment, but you don't mean overall. At any rate, I had gone through dialectical behavioral therapy. Now, this correlates to the coming up to the surface and looking around and thinking, oh my goodness, like, life is not as bad as it is. And so, and start walking, and that goes along with the dialectical behavioral therapy of realizing, okay, I can tolerate this. I can, like, things are not as bad especially when I have these tools available to me. So then I started eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy. And this goes along with the magical airplane. Because at first seeing this magical airplane, it's like, oh my gosh, like I had some uncertainty, because it's not like traditional therapy. But once I got into the airplane and I started to move upwards towards the sky, EMDR had opened up my mind in radical ways. And it was like having a button. Like, because what had happened is that I had discovered ways to do EMDR at home, because I had an amazing EMDR therapist, and she was such a good leader, and I was like, if I can do this, like, I'm gonna do this, you know. And because I already had I had the tools, I had all the things in play, to be able to do this on my own. I had a good support network, and I had the opportunity, so I took it. And EMDR has been the thing that has released me from a lot of limiting beliefs and a lot of trauma, and it's been absolutely amazing. I highly recommend it. Highly recommend it, because that was where it's like mind, body, soul. That was really where a lot of the transformation happened. And I experimented with EMDR, and now I like so much so that I almost want to like call it a whole different thing, because it's like, because I figured out limiting belief clusters, I figured out like memory clusters, and it's just been such an amazing journey. And then over time, I stopped doing EMDR. I got myself more centered, got myself more on the ground. I did do a little bit of EMDR, so it was almost like started off like not a whole lot, and then at one point there was a lot of EMDR, eye movement desensitization, and reprocessing therapy. And then slowly over time, I eased off of it, and got myself back down on the ground, if you will. And yeah, I feel a lot better. I really do. And it took a little bit of time to kind of resettle some of my relationships, to realize that some of my relationships were toxic for me. So there were some friends that I've unfortunately had to let go because I was no longer comfortable within the relationship, because I had made such huge changes to my mind and to how I see the world. Because when you have a very, very positive mindset towards the world and you're hanging around very, very negative people, there eventually you have to recognize that there's a change. And you can't always have everybody involved in your life. And I still love a lot of my friends very, very much, but some of them have just become so negative that it's just not worth it for either of us. And a lot of it is like basically saying they're at a different level, and not everybody can or is willing to stay in your life for forever, and we have to be okay with that. Okay, well, So some things to keep in mind. I did do a lot of work. Everybody's going to take a different amount of time. Everybody's going to have a different need, different traumas, different, you've heard the different traumas, different needs, different times, different sensitivities. So like what worked for me doesn't always work for everybody, or for everybody else. If you already have a lot of those like emotional regulations, you know, sometimes you might be able to start EMDR right away. Sometimes you might need to have a little bit more time, like, and again, depending on what level of PTSD or complex PTSD that you're in, you're going to require a different level of therapy in order to really be able to make that change, and in order to like transform your mindset and become a lot more positive, and have a lot more healthier view of life. So if you would like to donate, I'm going to have my links down below. I would like to, as much as possible, not have to do ads, but and so I do need donations, but like, because I still have, everybody has their things that they do, right? Like they have their needs, and as much as possible, I would like to be able to make this information freely available. But if I have to run ads, you know, then that's what I have to do. If you would like to have some resources, you can visit my website. I'm going to leave the links down below if you'd like to become a client of mine. Again, I'm going to leave the links down below, I think on Stripe, or you could get onto my Calendly right away, and we can talk and see if this is a good fit to start one-on-one coaching. Prices do vary. Minimum is $100 an hour. And with that, I'll say goodbye, and until next time.